Faster than a speeding bullet.
I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid.
More powerful than a locomotive.
An idea is like a virus. Resilient. Highly contagious.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Hey guys, Jared Moon here, and welcome to the Better Humanology podcast. Super pumped you guys are stopping in today. So we have Bob Troia on the podcast. He is a biohacker. This is really the second conversation in all of Better Humanology podcasting history that we've had like an actual biohacker on the podcast. The first time was Ben Greenfield, and he did like a biohacking 101. Now I have Bob on, and we go a little bit deeper than that. So if you are brand new to what biohacking is, we do give a little introduction to that, but you might want to go back and listen to that episode with Ben Greenfield I did. Now in this episode, like I said, we go a little bit deeper. We go into how he heavily reduced the amount of like heavy metals in his blood through infrared sauna use, how he's biohacking his home with air quality, water, and we also talk about heart rate variability and performance and recovery and all of those things. So you might want to get out a piece of paper and a pen and write down some notes and resources that he mentions. We even go into some ketogenic or ketosis or ketones that he's taking and he's had some really interesting experiences with. So without any further ado, let's talk to Bob. All right, Bob, I'm super pumped to have you on the Better Humanology podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right, man, we're going to get started with some challenges right away. So can you throw down a fitness challenge? And I think you were going to do 2 in 1. We did a little pre-discussion. So maybe fitness challenge and mental toughness challenge in one.
Yeah, sure. So if anyone's ever done things like wall sits, there's a concept of exercises called iso extremes, where you're putting yourself into sort of an extreme position, preparing the body to sort of absorb force. But if you took something like a wall sit, imagine doing that, but instead of holding yourself up, let's say with your quads, you're pulling yourself down into a position, like tensing the muscles in your hamstrings. And imagine trying to do this and hold this for like a period of like 5 minutes. And what you realize is even after a minute, your body starts going, it's not comfortable. It wants to tremble. Your legs will tremble. And what you realize is it's all mental. And if you shift your thoughts away from the actual act of what you're doing and think about something else, over time, you actually realize you can do this for several minutes and hold yourself in these types of positions at great length. And, it could be something like a wall sit or something that more is akin to like a really wide sort of forward lunge position. And for me, it's just been one of those things where your body and your brain are kind of both just going, like, ow. But yeah, I think it's a pretty cool way of, using even body weight exercises.
Yeah, man, those isometric contractions are tough. I used to do a ton of them when back in the bodybuilding days. I still do them occasionally, but man, they're brutal, and they are a huge mental test. A lot of times I want to like stop doing it, be like, this is stupid, I don't want to do it. But really, it's just because of how uncomfortable it is, and it's super super challenging. All right, dude. How about a book recommendation for all the listeners?
Sure. So we're gonna go in a direction here. It might be I wouldn't call it woo, but it's as I've been exploring my kind of health and biology and physiology, I've really kind of gone down the quantum biology rabbit hole. And there's this great book called Life on the Edge: The Coming Age of Quantum Biology. And it's a book that really provides this excellent overview of the concepts of quantum biology and what's really happening at a really, really deep level within us. When you start talking about, we're focusing on things like food and nutrition, but what is that really doing? You're breaking it down into electrons and getting into these weird processes in the body. And it's just a great book that you don't have to be a science nerd or technical to understand. They really break it down well.
That sounds very fascinating. What was like your biggest takeaway from that book?
Just the understanding of how when you start talking quantum, there's these concepts of this randomness of the way processes happen in the body. It's about probability, and also just when you start getting into the concept of particles and entanglement and things that could be in different parts of the system still somehow being sending information to each other in different ways, and at first you're just like, you're thinking it just doesn't make any sense, or it's kind of out there and woo. But now you're even seeing where, like, I think even just a few weeks ago, there was a story where I think some Chinese scientists were able to basically transport a piece of information, like a piece of matter from Earth to a satellite in space. And so it's kind of validating some of these things where the way we think of biology and everything, and there's a much deeper level to it.
Were they successful in the teleportation?
Yeah,
that's awesome, dude.
Yeah, they proved that it can happen.
That's amazing.
I mean, and again, it was you're talking about you're not transporting a living thing. You're transporting a piece of information from Earth to a satellite.
Gotcha. All right, man. So thank you so much for the challenges and the recommendation. How about you give us a little bit about your background, and then up to today and what you're working on, current projects and everything.
Yeah, sure. In a nutshell, my background's in technology. I've been working. I started my career in software development, a lot of it based around web technologies. I've been an entrepreneur for the better part of the last few decades, focused on everything from digital marketing, got into some work with 3D printing, and it's only been in the last few years where I've been really able to kind of start marrying my personal passion for health and wellness and kind of human performance, I guess you'd call it, with maybe some of the technology side of things, and kind of marrying all that in a way that where a lot of what I'm doing on those areas had always been more of just a personal hobby. But I've always been someone who has been really curious about how things work. And, over the past few years, especially with the advent of certain types of technologies and wearables and testing and things that we can now measure things that even 5 or 10 years ago we just couldn't do. And now it's accessible to anybody. And so for me, it's just been great to kind of take that dive in and kind of learn so much more about myself, and then test theories and, kind of toe the line between, I guess, what you would call quantified self and that whole idea of self-quantification and getting knowledge through data, and the other area, which a lot of people are calling biohacking, which is trying to figure out ways to optimize your physiology.
And would you consider yourself a biohacker?
I would.
Yeah.
From that standpoint of, trying to optimize what I have, not so much the other side of biohacking, which can be more like enhancing through other means, meaning like people who maybe want to implant things into their body or to gain additional senses and all that. I'm focused more on just working with what I have.
Yeah, and I think your site is called quantifiedbob, and so you're basically trying to quantify everything about you and then improve it. Is that kind of the main objective with different experiments and hacks and all those things?
Exactly. So when it started out, it was really just a place for me to dump a lot of my thoughts down. I didn't think anybody would really pay attention to it. It was more like just my repository for some self-experiments I had been doing. Some of it early on was just trying to, understand things like heart rate variability and what does that really mean? But then how does that affect me, let's say? And so what I've ended up doing over time is I'll either be just trying to discover something about myself through data, or test a theory, or structure an experiment. And then what's been great is the fact that we talk about this idea of N of 1 experiment. So what might work for me or not work for me won't be the same as you or another person. So we can all try these same types of experiments and we'll get probably different results because we are all individuals.
I think a lot of what you're doing is pretty awesome. What would you say is, I'd like to, because I want to bring it to the listeners too, maybe something that they could do, maybe your most practical experiment that you would recommend someone else do, and that's why I also say practical, like they could actually do that you saw good results from.
Sure. Well, I mean, there are basic things you can do. Like if you have sort of a daily morning ritual, I'll check my heart rate variability first thing every morning, even before I get out of bed. I'll either just roll over and grab my heart rate chest strap and put it on, or I have another app that runs on my phone called HRV for training, that you can actually use the camera lens and the flash on it. It will actually find your pulse off your finger, and within a few minutes you'll get a reading. And that, I imagine you've discussed this in the past, but like heart rate variability can give you insight into things like, are you overtrained? Maybe you're about to get sick. And so it gives you kind of a good view of like how hard you can go that day. So maybe if you've got a hard workout plan for the day, you should just take it easy.
What's funny is I just did a podcast last week on heart rate variability. Was a big part of it because what I've been doing, I've kind of been geeking out the last several months on recovery, and just every aspect of recovery. And I was trying to find out because I started tracking heart rate variability, and it was so sporadic. I felt like I couldn't control it. Like it'd be good, it'd be bad, so up and down. And so I was looking at all these things. I was looking at sleep, nutrition, hydration, heart rate variability, resting heart rate, and once I feel like I had everything else locked in, I was like, okay, what's the one variable that I can't seem to affect at all? And that was heart rate variability. It seemed that way. And then finally I got to just in testing over several months that the only way I could affect my heart rate variability in all reality was more aerobic work on top of what I was already doing. So I started cycling, just like this, like I'm talking about like weak ass pace cycling for 30 minutes in the morning on top of the training I was already doing, which is typically like high intensity weightlifting and all this other stuff. And now my heart rate variability is very stable day to day. What have you found through testing and heart rate variability? Because I haven't, to be honest, I haven't had a lot of conversations. I've done a lot of reading about it, but I haven't met someone else who tracks it that often. So I was wondering what you found in tracking that over time.
Yeah, I mean, initially I had similar experiences as you, or I was trying to pinpoint like what were the sort of levers that you'd pull to get a change, a positive change, or what caused a negative response to your following morning's HRV. And I'll give you one interesting insight. So you would think drinking alcohol would have a negative effect on your HRV the next morning. Because let's say, if somebody went out and just had a bunch of drinks. But what I found for myself was if I went out, let's say, and had just maybe like one or two glasses of wine with dinner or something like that, my HRV the next day would actually be increased. It would increase.
Nice.
And I could not, and it just didn't make sense. I'm looking at the data. I'm like, this should not make sense. If anything, it should have a negative effect with it. But then when I started looking over, like, okay, so what was the context of when I was having, one or two drinks or going out? And again, this wasn't super frequently, but it was always in a social context. It was always when I was hanging out with some friends or friends in town or people I care about, which showed me that there's a huge psychological component to activating your parasympathetic nervous system. And I kind of felt like the wine wasn't really that had nothing to do with that result with HRV. It actually had more to do with being social, surrounding yourself with people and having friends and versus being holed up and alone and like working by yourself and, somewhere. So that for me was like kind of a really huge, insightful thing. So I'm as guilty as anyone, like, especially I live in New York City and everyone's very busy and we have busy schedules and it's hard to make time to like really spend time with friends sometimes. And I made an effort to sort of really do that more because I saw it, like it makes me feel better and it's great to see be around other people and your friends and we just take it for granted sometimes. And for me, that was a definite impact on my HRV.
That's awesome, man. That's I love it when it's those there's you may have been able to find it, but there's like if you were to read all the studies on HRV or articles and everything, you probably wouldn't have found an article that like was all about being social, and like being like to improve your heart rate variability. So I think it's awesome when you find those personal measures that can, like you said, pull that lever that has an effect. Have you found anything else interesting about heart rate variability? This is 100% out of my own personal curiosity.
For me personally, so there's the sort of daily, you're trending kind of like how recovered you are, whether you can train hard or take it easy that day. But you can also do like acute measurement of HRV. Like we could both be wearing chest straps right now and measuring, if you've ever given a talk in public or something like that, you can see how stressed out you are in real time. If your body gives away, it's like a lie detector. And I did some fun experiments where I was measuring my kind of the effects in two scenarios. One was gambling. So actually just I wore it. I went to like in New York, we have the Belmont Stakes. It's one of the Triple Crown horse races, and spend the day. And it's something where I just collected data all day, and I had heart rate variability as well as some other data points, and I could see the way my body would respond as you got close to each race, if you placed a bet on it, or what your response was if you won or lost, and it was kind of an interesting way to see your body's physiology around that. And the second way, I've taken sort of the same setup and I've gone to see like a movie. So I would go to like an IMAX movie of some, like I think I did it once with like that movie Interstellar. It's about like a 3.5 hour movie. And I was able to plot all my data along like with the movie timeline. And I could see like where I got really excited or part that was maybe more focused. I was trying to focus on something or got surprised. And those are just, more fun. It teaches you a little bit about yourself, but I would say in the context of like, a major training and recovery and all that, no, it may not have much to do with that, but I do think it's fun if you want to learn more about yourself.
No, I think it's awesome. And one thing I'm trying to do is, so I wake up in the morning and do heart rate variability, but it's done for me. I wear the Whoop strap, so it like it basically processes it. I hit process and then I lay my phone back down. But I try to gauge where I think my recovery is at before seeing it, because that's a big thing for me. Is I love the tech, but I want to be as intuitive as possible, and that's what I'm trying to get, like different sensors and stuff to train me to be a better athlete intuitively, as well as backing it up with data. Because at first I really sucked at it, but I'm getting a lot better. Like this morning, I woke up, I didn't get a ton of sleep, and I was like, but I feel really good. I think this is going to be like high recovery day, and it was. So I think that stuff is really fun. One thing I want to talk about, I was looking at your website today. So I've done a lot of DIY projects at into3fitness.com, and mainly for garage gym athletes. Like we've done squat racks and DIY pulley systems, and just, I mean, there's over 20 different projects I've done over the course of time. And when I saw your DIY, is it a near infrared?
Correct.
That thing is, dude, I'm probably going to buy every single piece of equipment that you recommended on there. I'll have it built within the next 7 days, most likely, because I've had my eye on a infrared sauna for a long time, but they're like pretty expensive. I'm sure the benefits are worth it. But what's been your experience with one, infrared saunas, and then two, I want to get into kind of just personally any tips and tricks for doing this DIY project?
Sure. So I've been doing a ton with infrared saunas over the last few years. Originally, I got into them to explore the benefits with regards to both boosting my immune system, because I was kind of going after some lingering issues, and I thought that would be a good way to kind of go at it, as well as detoxification. Because I was reading about the benefits of, and again, when you talk about infrared saunas, there's different wavelengths, and that depending on whether you go to a full spectrum sauna, a near infrared, or far infrared, you'll get different systemic benefits out of them. So the first thing I did was I had done some lab testing that showed I had a pretty bad burden of some heavy metals, mainly lead and mercury, and I was trying to figure out ways to like get that out of my system. How do I reduce that toxic burden? Now, I don't know exactly where it came from. It could, like lead could be stuff all the way back to childhood. It's been in your bones. And whereas mercury could be more just ongoing. It could be food. It can be just the environment. And I basically I kind of took it to the extreme. I did a 30-day protocol where I spent about an hour and a half each day in the infrared sauna, but about an hour before I go in, I would take a bunch of niacin. And niacin makes, you get that huge flush reaction. You actually want that flush to kind of bypass, but what it's doing is it was helping open up blood vessels, bring everything closer to your skin to help speed up detoxification. And also, it has the ability to help with lipolysis. So, a lot of toxins in your body are actually stored in your fat cells. So you want to, by rupturing them and helping, that the process of lipolysis, the thinking was it would help speed up detoxification. So I did this for a month, and then I retested, and I saw that there was a noticeable drop in both the mercury and lead levels in my body. So I was actually pleasantly surprised about that. Now, those types of infrared saunas, like I had to go to a place and I was paying a lot of money for each session to use the infrared saunas because they cost several $1,000s, to kind of go in them or to own one. And so I started looking at these near infrared saunas. So the near infrared sauna is, the bulbs look more like if you ever see the heat lamps over food in a restaurant, that kind of like reddish kind of bulb. Those are infrared. Those bulbs are pretty inexpensive. For just maybe $10 to $20 a bulb, you can get them. And there are companies out there that have really nice near infrared sauna systems set up, but they're still pretty expensive. And so I was kind of thinking, like, wouldn't it be cool to just make my own? I think you could, you get the right components for it. The rest of it, you're just sort of mounting onto something. As long as you have a place to put it, you can have one in your home. And I cobbled together one for, I think, under $150. And literally, I got 4 of this one type of infrared bulb with some little fixtures to hold them. And probably the most expensive thing I had to buy was I found this like $30 shoe rack with wheels on Amazon that I could clamp the lights onto. So it lets me kind of change the configuration of them. So I can like put them in a square pattern or a diamond pattern, depending if I'm like sitting in front of it or standing in front of it, or want to spin around and kind of rotate my body around it. And and it's something that I think anyone can build very easily and inexpensively. And if they decide they want to get something that's more of like that full spectrum, full on sort of experience, they can either go to find a facility that has one, or if they have the means, eventually purchase one.
So what is the difference between full spectrum and near infrared?
So infrared, if you think of the different wavelengths, the electromagnetic spectrum, near infrared are in the infrared side of things, are towards the bottom. So probably closer to like 900 to 1,000 nanometers. When you go, then there's something called medium and then far. So a full spectrum infrared sauna just means it covers all of the bases. There are some saunas now that are just one or the other. They'll just say they're a far infrared sauna, or they'll say they're just a near infrared sauna. So you're going to get just a portion of that spectrum, which will give you different benefits. So again, the near infrared tends to be more about helping the body with detoxification, whereas the far near infrared is more about immune boosting, whereas the far tends to be more detoxification. And there's a little bit of overlap there. It's not like all or nothing, but a full spectrum tends to help you cover all the bases. Okay.
That's very interesting. And would you, now that you have the project, and I'm going to build one, I'm not kidding either. I'll send you the pictures when I'm done. Any tips or tricks for me? Because you've probably been using it, frequently, and maybe you might want to give me some pointers.
Yeah. So one trick is it depends where you have it set up, and if you're in a big room, because the idea is you want to also get your body temperature up a bit. And so infrared saunas are not going to be anywhere near as hot as if you went to like a regular old traditional sauna with the stones and everything. That gets, your body's going to get really hot. And infrared sauna kind of works on the premise of like it's heating you up from the inside. So like your skin should not get as hot, and you'll still have tremendous sweat and all of that. So I had to sort of set it up in a bathroom in my home, so that I could have a smaller room. I could kind of let it heat up a little bit. And some people have messed around with creating like canvas tarps or tents to put around them so they can trap all the heat inside of it. That way it helps get their body temperature up faster, because that's what we're really trying to do. You're trying to get your body, you need to sweat. And so that would be like my main point of advice would be, make sure you have a way to help facilitate getting your body temperature up, getting to the sweat stage.
Okay. And so what would you recommend for making some sort of like canopy or tent or whatever?
I mean, I've seen ways where you could buy the fabric, some kind of a eco-friendly kind of canvas material, and you can either drape it over so the way mine's set up is I have a bathroom, there's a tub, and so the stand has little wheels and stuff, but I set it all up inside. It's not going to have water running on it or anything, but it's inside the bathtub because I don't have a lot of space. But what I can do is the lights stick out. I don't stand in the tub. I stand outside of the tub, but I can drape the fabric kind of down and over. So if you need to trap things in. Also, my bathroom has kind of the I guess it's a fan or whatever. It kind of has a heating element in the bathroom, I guess. to keep, when you get out of the shower or whatever. So I'll turn that on like 10, 15 minutes before to help kind of preheat the room a little bit. And that seems to also have an effect.
That's awesome, dude. Is this something that you do every day?
I would say most days.
Most days?
Yeah. So I would say it's especially we're in summertime right now. And another benefit was my my air conditioning in my home went out earlier this week, and it was pretty hot in New York City. So I got the benefit of like, oh, if I'm going to sweat in my home, I might as well do some sauna sessions because it's already sweating. So yeah, it worked out.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been looking to do one for a while. I think I'm gonna now with your instructions. I'm definitely gonna get it knocked out. And last question about that: how much? You said it was niacin, right? How much niacin were you taking?
So the body kind of will adapt to it. So when I first started, it may have just been, and again, I was probably doing some stuff that maybe you want to talk to a doctor first if you have any conditions. But I started off with just maybe 100 to 200 milligrams of niacin, but every day I would increase the dose. So basically, eventually the flush reaction will stop happening. Your body builds a tolerance to it. And so I'd increase it. And by the end of the 30 days, I think on the last day, I got up to, it was pretty much 5 grams of niacin. So 5,000 milligrams. Yeah. But again, it was a very gradual sort of buildup. And then after the 30 days, I had to bring myself back down. So then I would cut the dose in half every day for another 4 or 5 days until I got back down to about a few hundred milligrams.
That's great, man. So what, I know you said you came kind of from a technology background, entrepreneur, but what kind of started this whole process of tracking, biohacking, everything that you're doing now? What really made you want to get deep into the weeds, if you will?
Yeah, I've been tracking things since I was a teenager. I mean, think about your work, having your notebooks full of your workouts and tracking your weight and your nutrition, and you didn't have apps and tools that can do all this stuff. So you took like a tape measure and a pencil and a ruler and stopwatch and all that stuff. So I was always tracking that sort of thing, and doing it by hand or putting it in the spreadsheets. And then it's really just been over the last few years where the technology has evolved to let us kind of get access to information or understand things that we couldn't do just, even a few years ago. And being that my background's in technology and trying to understand how things work. And, for me, it was like my eyes kind of lit up when I realized like, wow, I can get all these insights about myself. So I kind of took a deep dive, not just in, buying a bunch of, different types of tech and all of that, but really just trying to understand more about my body and physiology. Like I don't have a background in those areas. So I had to kind of really bone up on a lot of that stuff. And then as these tools and devices were coming out and I was kind of, trying a lot of things out, seeing things that worked or didn't work, or things that might've been like the cool new shiny object. But, in 6 months, it's kind of irrelevant, because this technology is changing so fast. And, I'll be using some devices that I think are great, and then the company will just go under, and then you're left with whatever. But, the big thing for me was always, these tools are all great, but if I can't get the data out of them, then for me, it's kind of like almost not worth it, because if I'm trying to establish insights, I might feel like, well, yeah, this thing seems cool, but if it's just some black box that you don't really know how it's figuring out what it's figuring out, like that's for me is kind of like just a downer on the whole aspect of it. So, because I realize there's a lot of devices out there, and they're all trying to collect different pieces of data, and these manufacturers for the most part are now trying to hoard that information because they realize that's their value is in the data they own on people, not the devices themselves. Because you buy like a Fitbit or a Jawbone, it's kind of like a one-time purchase. It's all so they're actually making more money selling the data to third parties, and whether maybe not your personal information, but even if they aggregate it, it's that's the model that they've kind of seen.
Yeah, and I've been a huge wearable fan. I mean, ever since they started coming online, but I could never find one that really met my needs as far as fitness is related. Like it'd always be some new promise of this one's better or tracks better, but a lot of it was never helping me. What are some wearables that you're liking right now that you enjoy?
Yes, over the years, there's been some that I thought were pretty good, and then only to be, either the company gets acquired and shut down, or they just went under. There was a a wearable called Basis that was out for a number of years and had collected tons of data, probably more than anything else that was out there. Intel bought them, and within a year shut the whole thing down. So then what I'm actually doing now, I'm kind of showing you on, I don't know if you can see right now, but I'm actually wearing 3 different things. I'm wearing a Jawbone up. So in Jawbone, they're going to be another company that's about to go under, I heard. So that's going to be irrelevant soon. But I also have a Fitbit, Blaze, and then an Oura ring. So these are all, this tracks on your finger. And the reason I'm wearing all 3 is I'm actually kind of doing some experiments right now to compare the data that they're collecting. Because what you realize is, like, especially with sleep, they're all giving me very different results. And so which one's correct?
Right.
Hard to say. I mean, even with heart rate, I've done some high intensity workouts where, getting my heart rate up into high aerobic zones, and I comparing it to like a pulse oximeter reading. And I would see that, like, for example, that like my Fitbit device actually would stay within maybe 3 to 4 beats per minute at a high rate, which I was actually surprised by. Whereas the other stuff just could not keep, like, once you get above a certain beats per minute, it just can't keep up with it. But on the sleep side, it's, kind of like we were talking about with HRV. Like, when I wake up in the morning, I try to predict what my sleep data was going to look like. I'm just gonna be like, oh, how many dreams did I have? Because that'll give me a sign of, like, how many REM cycles did I have, because that kind of gives you kind of insights into that. And then when I look at the data, like, one device would say, you kind of slept terrible. and then another device is like, wow, you're all recovered today. You're great. And that's a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with Brian McKenzie about devices, and he was talking about how, like, wearing them over time just started to stress him out. He'd be like, damn it, like, I got to get to bed like in the next 10 minutes, or, or else my reading is going to be bad in the morning and all this stuff. So he has said eventually had to stop wearing them. Have you ever run into anything like that?
I don't get stressed out about the data. I mean, for me, it's more real, if anything, I try to collect as much as I can and then start just chipping away to get it down to the minimum. It's kind of like the minimum effective dose, or whatever you want to call it. So if I know, like, instead of trying to measure 20 things, if there's 3 or 4 that get me 90% of the way there, and for me, that's because the whole point is, if you're trying to create efficiencies in your life and try to understand more about yourself, if you're creating more stress and more work and labor for yourself, it's sort of a self-defeating proposition, Yeah,
use with caution and know yourself pretty well. One thing I have to ask you, what have you done any experiments to improve cognitive function?
I have, actually. Recently, I did actually an experiment around ketone esters. So I'm sure a lot of people know about ketosis and about taking exogenous ketones, whether they're salt-based. I mean, most of the products that are out in the market now are kind of a mix, a packet of like a ketone-based, salt-based ketones, and you mix them and drink them. I got hold of these ketone esters, which is like the purest form. These are things that are made like in a laboratory that would cost someone probably like 20 grand to make like a serving of, and they use them mainly for like mice studies or get them to very, very elite athletes. But there were some folks that had figured out a way to produce these esters, and they were working with like Tour de France athletes and kind of that level of folks. And I kind of said to them, well, why don't we try to look at how this can affect cognitive performance? Because I was really interested in doing some experiments around cognitive function and what can kind of, have effects on them. So what I did was I needed to establish some baselines about different areas of cognition, whether it's working memory or the ability to there's like impulse-based tests you can do, and there's an app a lot of people use called Lumosity it has a bunch of games essentially, and there's debate over like people who do them every day, are you actually getting smarter or better? And I wasn't going in that direction. I was just using it as an assessment tool. So what I wanted to do was create some baselines, just knowing how good I am at the games, and then seeing after taking the ketone esters, would there be an effect or a change to any of my scores around, I think there's 5 categories of tests. And so it took me a few weeks to just play these games over and over and over, spend hours doing it until there's something called a learning effect where, you just get better kind of at playing the game. So naturally your scores are going to improve and improve. And so I wanted them to like plateau. I needed to get them to where like I was not getting any better. I could not get any better at these games no matter what. So once I did that, I was ready to take these ketone esters. And they, flavor wise, They're pretty nasty taste. It's a pretty nasty tasting thing, but but I found that if you just chase it with like a sip of sparkling mineral water, it actually helps the taste go away. And so what I did was, what was cool was I took about 40 grams of it, and within 15 minutes, my ketone meter went off the chart. So like I basically blew through. I was over 8.0 millimolars per liter of in terms of my ketone levels, which is like a deep therapeutic ketosis. This is something that I could never even achieve with a 5-day fast, and I got that in 15 minutes. So we waited an hour because I wanted.
So are you actually in ketosis already? I'm talking about like from a low carbohydrate diet, or is this just from taking the ketones?
I do things like intermittent fasting, so I'm fairly keto adapted, but I'm probably in ketosis for a nutritional ketosis for a small part, overnight into the morning until I have a first feed. But I was not in keto. Like when I first started taking the esters, I was not in ketosis.
Okay. Yeah.
And so as soon as I took them, though, within 15 minutes, it's like just shot right up. And so, of course, like anyone who's been in ketosis and deep ketosis knows, like you start feeling really interesting. your brain, your mind starts feeling very sharp and clear, and you're just like there's just that feeling that you get when you're in ketosis. And I knew it was coming on. So an hour later, I went and redid these tests and played all the little games or tests, whatever you want to call them. And my scores across the board shot up. I think in some categories, as high as 30% over what I had plateaued at, and other ones maybe it was down to maybe like 5 or 6%, but there was some like massive changes to some of those scores. So I was actually like pretty amazed about it. So the only thing I would say is they, for an acute sort of boost to cognitive performance, they had an immense response, or they helped generate that. So I imagine if someone's like a poker player or someone that wants a quick boost to, where they need it for like a competition or something like that, it's great. I think, the cost still for that type of product is still like, it's going to be prohibitively expensive for most people, to use like as a regular sort of day-to-day thing. But my hope is that maybe over time, like the cost can get it down. So we're like, but like the same way these ketone salts are maybe like $5 to $7 a serving, it could be something that, people could take at a much, get for a much more affordable price.
How much were these, the ones you were taking?
They were probably going to retail for about, I think they were somewhere around $200 a serving. Wow. Still. So, you went but you're seeing the factor of like 20,000 now to 200. Yeah. Eventually it'll probably be like 50, but it's, it's kind of bleeding edge stuff. So it's stuff that, I think it probably has a lot to do with, just if you can scale up production of something like that, the cost will come down. When they're making it kind of small batches, it's going to be very expensive.
And have you ever experimented with the more affordable ones, the ketone salts? Is that what you're?
Yeah, the salt-based ketones. Yeah, I've done some things with them. I don't get the problem with taking the salt-based ketone esters are to get the same effect as what I got from the esters. I would have had to probably take something like, I think I calculated it was maybe like nine servings of the salts, which meant I would have had to also drink about 1.5 gallons of water, and the amount of salt that's in all those packets would have probably not been good for my body. Yeah. But I've also found that like the salt-based ketones for me, like they'll get me into like a nice little nutritional ketosis, like 0.5, 1.0 millimolars per liter. It's and I think, but you're not going to be able to you can't achieve that deep level as far as I know with the salts I've used. There might be some people trying to develop some new ones, but the main issue is that most ketone salts to date, there's two forms of ketone monoester, of the ketones, that only half of them are bioavailable to the body, the other half aren't. Whereas the ketone esters are 100% the bioavailable, the salts are only 50%. So 50% of what you're taking in, your body isn't able to actually use.
How about current experiments, man? Do you have anything that you're working on or you're excited about?
Yeah, I've been experimenting with some pretty cool technologies, some devices that are helping boost mitochondrial function in the body, as well as lower oxidative stress, boost ATP production. And so I've got a hold of this. There's this device called NanoV. That's it's basically you breathe in this water vapor, but it's been structured with an infrared, a certain signal in it that mimics what the body uses to reduce oxidative stress in the body. So we often, we're just bombarded each day with from the environment or foods we eat and exposure to toxins, and our body has systems to kind of help with that. We also take antioxidants to help with that, but the antioxidants can't repair the damage. They just clear out the free radicals and all that. So I've been experimenting with this device over the past month, and kind of like I was just measuring like my oxidative stress levels and seeing how they went down. But then there was these weird side effects where, well, not side effects, but benefits. One of them was I had a rapid, I'm fairly lean, but I dropped like over 3% body fat. Like it just came off within weeks, and with no changes to workout, no changes to diet. While my weight I increased lean mass, because my weight was essentially the same the whole time. So it's interesting. So I have theories about what's going on with what this is doing inside to my body in terms of helping with cellular repair and all that. I'm also doing some experiments around. If you ever heard of anything called EWOT, exercise with oxygen training. Mm-hmm. So the idea of kind of wearing an oxygen mask, breathing in 90% pure oxygen while doing some kind of training. So let's say riding an exercise bike or an elliptical or, something that gets your heart rate up. So there's another spin on this that's called adaptive contrast training. And so there's a company called Livo2 that I've been using this system where you basically, you're doing these series of sprints where you go between hypoxic state. So you're doing like a sprint of 15 seconds on a bike as hard as you can, breathing in you're simulating like high altitude, so about 10% oxygen. And then after like 15 or 30 seconds, you flip a switch and then it floods you with 90% oxygen. It gets super deep into your tissues, and you do about a series of 5 or 6 of these sprints. And then you wait until your heart rate kind of recovers. And this has huge effects on everything from improving things like VO2 max to kind of flushing the body, flushing things out of the body. And so I've been messing around with that because I'm actually trying to see how this affects things like boosting my immune system functions. And so I did a bunch of lab tests before, and now as I use it, probably like a month later, I'll retest and then see the effects of that. So those are some cool like training type things I'm doing. Other experiments, like I do a lot with trying to optimize my indoor environment or my home. So air quality, water quality, light, just because you realize we spend, we can spend all this time trying to fix ourselves and fix our bodies, but if the environment we're in is just crap, then it's all for nothing.
So real quick, I could probably talk to you all day. I think I love everything that you're talking about, and so water quality. What have you found in your research, or what are you using for? I'm assuming you're doing some sort of like water filtration system, or you have a water filter. Which one are you using?
So there's all sorts of tools and devices and filtration systems to be used. So I'm in New York, and the first thing I actually did is I just tested our tap water. And obviously, I know there's fluoride in it and all that, but it actually tested fairly clean of any other sort of stuff. So I was like, okay, well, the actual tap water itself is aside, I'm not going to drink just right out of the tap, but it's better than most of the rest of the country in terms of like any other toxins or contaminants in there. So what I've been using is it's basically a filtration system. It comes in a pitcher form though. It's called Zero Water. Okay. And what it's got a pretty elaborate filtration system. So if you even just take any tap water, you put it in, and the reason they call it Zero Water is it includes. There's a what's it called? A little meter it's on the lid of the pitcher, and anytime you pour a glass of water, you can just put the meter into your water, and it should read zero, meaning there's no and no particles, like nothing in the water. It should whereas the regular tap water, like let's say New York City, might have something like like 150 parts per billion or whatever, a million. I forget what think it's billion. And when you realize it's kind of their whole thing is they're proving to you that like it's stripping everything out of there, like so you can kind of be more healthy. But at the end of the day, what I realized was, that's a nice little fix to deal with like tap water, but there's nothing that can replace just drinking like good quality spring water, mineral water. So, that's where I tend to, focus my efforts there more. So I'd rather just get good quality water, drinking water that way, versus, trying to put, there's all sorts of things you can put in the water to help both, make it more alkaline or do other things to it. And I'd rather just work with, what Mother Nature has.
That's great, man. And how about air quality? What are you doing in your house to improve your air quality?
And well, there's a number of things. So when I first started kind of looking at what's going on in my home, I was looking at different meters, and there's little air quality meters that are out there. Some that cost just a few $100s. So there's some like I actually originally built one myself, just using some cheap sensors and kind of hooked it up to like a little microcomputer, and I can just kind of see different things that are kind of in my home. With air quality, I mean, the main issues, and for me, it's living again in New York City it's kind of like a catch-22 because you need to have airflow and stuff in your home, but by opening your window, you're letting in a lot of crap that's coming in from the outside, whether it's car exhaust, brake dust, all sorts of other things. So you have to kind of find that happy medium. And what I found was, like an example would be, I was trying to figure out the effects of air quality on sleep, and I realized that I would tend to wake up in the middle of the night. For some reason, and eventually go back to sleep. And what it turns out, it was that my bedroom door was closed, and overnight the carbon dioxide levels build up in the room if there's no way for it to get out. And when the oxygen levels get too low, your body will just sort of wake up. So then the idea would be, okay, well, if I open my bedroom door slightly or crack a window open slightly, I could get some airflow. But then you have to deal with what's coming outside through the window. Kind of those types of things, or even like noise coming from the outside that can wake you up and ruin your sleep. So I ended up getting some HEPA filters, some air to kind of help filter the air in my home, so I can basically deal with any particulate matter that's in the air, whether it's dust or anything else, and just have it running, and it will definitely clean out the air. And I've seen I have in my bedroom I have a device called a Foobot, Foobot, and it's like a little. It looks almost like one of those Alexas. It's a little thing that just has the sensors all built into it, and you can check it off. Just an app for your phone that I can load at any given time to see what the conditions are in the room that it's put in. So I'll have like one in my bedroom, let's say, and one in my living area, and I'll know whether I need to run the HEPA filter. I can even now actually it's set up so that you can kind of automate some of those things. So you can actually have like home automation in place. So if the Foobot senses that your air quality gets too low, it can trigger the air filter to go on and run for an hour, and then clean, get all the particulate matter out of the air. So kind of going in the more smart home route of things. But yeah,
that's awesome, dude. Well, I appreciate you letting me just basically pick your brain on all your experiments and everything. I think what you're doing is awesome. But I want to get to the quickfire questions of the show. Are you ready?
I hope so.
All right, man. What's the hardest workout you've ever done?
Hardest. So I would say it's really contingent on my cardiovascular condition at the time that I was doing it. So I remember the first time I ever did a CrossFit workout, it just killed me. Like I was like, why am I tasting blood? Like I was like, this is kind of weird, like that. But because it was new. You're doing some different exercises and things that you haven't done before. I would say the hardest workout ever was probably for me. I think I did a Muay Thai class once, and that was like I think I definitely puked after it. That was pretty tough.
Yeah, those anything Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, all of those are if someone listening's never done it, do it. It'll be the hardest workout you've probably ever done, even if you're consider yourself pretty conditioned. All right, man. In your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
Best activity for mental toughness. I would say a combination of some form of meditation and also some. I think what I mentioned earlier about those ISO extreme type exercises, because it just really forces you not, it's almost like taking your mind off of something, and so it's going to help build mental toughness through not, you're having to fight through the pain by ignoring it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think. And why meditation?
Because I think it's the only time that, at least for me, where you're just kind of there with yourself in your head, and I just had some pretty interesting experiences when I started. I started out just basic kind of guided meditations, like 5 or 10 minutes a day, using there's different meditation apps out there, and I kind of felt like for me it just made me become more aware of things, more self-aware, and definitely had an effect on, like, I guess, my behavior to some degree. And yeah, but I think it is challenging. I mean, having to sit there and just be in your own head for a little bit. The only other time I would say I was like that would be like, if you're just laying in a float tank or something and you're like by yourself for an hour or two, and it's all in your head.
That's great, man. And I agree with you. I just wanted to get your take on it. All right. If you could only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Okay. And it can be anything.
Anything you want.
Oh, all right. I would say, because I think I could do a lot with my own body, so I would say a set of gymnastics rings.
All right, awesome.
Because I think you could do a lot of different things with those. So.
Oh yeah. All right, man. Here's the question of the show: what is the best advice you have for becoming a better human? And this is 100% open-ended.
Well, I think it's a combination of just being curious, like trying to don't ever just accept the way things are, trying to just always explore and learn more about yourself. Because I think even by learning more about yourself, it ultimately makes you a better, more optimal person. I think the way then you also affect other people or impact society or anything like that will have that benefit as well. So that's kind of as open-ended and broad as I can keep it. I think just be an inquisitive mind and just always be curious. Yeah.
Dude, I love it. All right, Bob, I've had a blast talking to you now. I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to dive a little bit deeper into some of your experiments and stuff. So where would you want people to go or point them to if they have questions or want to learn more about what you're doing after they listen to the show?
Sure. I read about all of these things on my blog, so it's just quantifiedbob.com. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's just quantifiedbob, and I tend to do a lot more visual stuff on there, a lot more kind of spontaneous behind the scenes things. So versus the longer form kind of post I would do on my blog. Also Quantified Bob on Twitter, if you want to follow me there.
Awesome. And I will link to all of those things in the show notes for this episode. But Bob, thank you so much for being on the show.
All right. Thanks, Jared.
Your best. Losers always whine about their best.